Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for the WebExpo 2019 Security, Passwords, Backup and Risk Management. My name is Tina and I'm the Capability Building Coordinator at Connecting Up. Connecting Up is a part of the Info Exchange Group. Info Exchange is a not-for-profit social enterprise that has delivered technology for social justice for over 25 years. With over 100 staff across Australia and New Zealand, we tackle the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. I'd like to welcome you all to the first session for today, Password-Related Cyber Breaches on the Rise, which will be presented by Ronald Gange from ESET. Just a little bit of housekeeping to start with. Please note that the link that you use to join this session will be the same link that you will need to join every other session in today's WebExpo. The GoToWebinar panel will close after every session to allow for the next speaker to prepare and set up for their session. If you run into any issues reconnecting and need to contact me for assistance, please send an email to events@connectingup.org. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to answer your questions through there. If you have any questions during this session for Ron, please also type it into the questions box and he'll be able to answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. Please note that the session is being recorded and you can access all the recordings and materials on our website tomorrow. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of each of the sessions. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to provide us with some feedback. Now, that's all from me for now. I'll hand it over to Ron to get things started. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Tina, and good morning, everyone. My name is Ronald Gange, and I'm the pre-sales engineer for ESET Australia. So the topic that I have today is password-related cyber breaches on the rise. So during this presentation, I'm going to be covering the current situation with cybercrime and the real threats facing Australian organisations. I'll be discussing cybersecurity breaches, but more specifically, those that are related to passwords and authentication. We're also going to be examining the risks due to insecure nature of passwords, and also look at simple and elegant solutions for improving security over passwords, simply by adding an additional layer of protection to prevent unauthorized access to computer systems. As Tina mentioned, at the end of the presentation, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, so please feel free to send any questions to the chat and we can answer those later. What is ESET? Over 30 years ago, two programmers in Slovakia discovered a virus that was infecting computers. They wrote a program to detect and remove it. NOD, or the hospital at the end of the disk, was born. Many years later, now ESET is one of the most trusted antivirus companies in the world, having received more independent VB100 awards than any other antivirus company for its detection and malware blocking capabilities. ESET now specializes in multi-layered defense technologies that protect computers against cyber threats. So I'm just going to give a little time for Tina to ask a poll or a couple of poll questions. If you can please take it away, Tina. I think some poll questions will be on your screens. And then once that's done, Tina will go through the results that we have.
Just one more to go, everyone. All right, Ron. So the first question was, have you or anyone you know been affected by viruses, malware, or ransomware? 90% have answered yes, 10% have answered no. Second question is, have you ever forgotten a password? 95% have said yes, 5% have said no. And the third question, have you ever used any banking websites that send you a text message with a code to verify your identity? 95% have said yes and 5% have said no.
Great, thanks everyone, and thanks Tina. So based on the information that we've gotten, most of us here have or know someone who has been a victim of cybercrime in one form or another, whether it be getting a virus, malware on the computer, or having your data encrypted for ransom. So what we've seen in the last 5 years is that the situation has gotten so out of hand and cyber criminals have gotten so brazen that the government has had to intervene and create legislation, legislating the mandatory reporting of data breaches. This means that a company, when they discover that it has been breached or has had their data ransomed, must report to the Office of Australian Information Commissioner within 14 days. To be in breach of this legislation means that strong penalties will apply, up to $10 million for the worst offenders. I think the aim of the government for this is to put accountability and responsibility for security back within the leadership and directors of an organization. You know, this new law applies to public and private organizations alike that are already subject to the Privacy Act. This includes both Australian government agencies and all businesses and not-for-profit organizations with an annual turnover of more than $3 million. So since we've gone through that, what is a data breach? So a data breach occurs when confidential information is accessed by a third party without authorization. This can be caused either by human error, system misconfiguration, or deliberate malicious attacks. Based on a study done by a cybersecurity company, FireEye, 51% of all reported data breaches are caused by malicious cyber attacks. So these are intentional attacks that are done either to break into a company's network, to be able to pilfer their data and information belonging to the company and its customers. And 25% of data breaches are caused by system glitches, and 24% are by human error. Since the introduction of mandatory breach notification, some of the notable breaches that we've had include Australian Catholic University. They discovered a cybersecurity breach that originated from a phishing attack where attackers had created a website that mimics the site, an internal site in the Australian Catholic University. So this affected multiple staff login credentials and compromised university systems. In June of 2019, the Australian National University reported a data breach which came from a targeted cyber attack against the university. After further investigations, it appears that the initial cyber attack occurred as early as May 2018. So imagine between May 2018 and June 2019, the attackers would have had free reign within the network, establishing itself, moving across the network, gathering accounts and password and credentials, as well as getting more and more access to the systems and data. In July 2019, the National Australia Bank also had a data breach that affected over 13,000 customers, where the information of the customers were uploaded to a third party. While the investigation that they had said that this was not a cyber attack, but a mistake, it still constituted a breach and needed to be reported. And only as late as October 2019, multiple Victorian hospitals were compromised through phishing and custom-made malware. This prevented hospitals from providing care as it affected systems that involve patient care and other computers. So as we can clearly see, the attackers cyber criminals target both companies as well as non-profit organizations. So since it started, there has been over 1,000 data breaches being reported. Studies have shown that in Australia, the average number of days it takes before the breach is detected is 200 days. So within that time, attackers would be inside your network or within your company and performing different illegal actions and trying to obtain as much data as they can, or trying to establish a foothold so that they can launch further attacks. The average number of days that it takes to contain one breach once it's detected is 81 days. So for those 281 attackers to perform the actions that they do. So with that, a study from the Containment Institute has shown that the average cost of a data breach is $3.8 million. With mandatory notifiable act, the penalty for not reporting a breach is between $2.1 million to $10 million. But the real cost to the business is the loss of its reputation, and that's priceless. Now, studies done by the SANS, which is Systems Admin, Audit, Network and Security, a global not-for-profit organization that specializes in training and education of IT professionals, conducted a survey in 2017, and it revealed that business leaders are most concerned regarding attacks including phishing, spear phishing, and whaling. Those are email attacks intending to gain access to usernames and passwords by tricking individuals, employees, and people who own accounts to be able to reveal their passwords and their usernames. And the top malware-less threats are that those that compromise credentials or usernames and passwords. A study by Verizon shows that 81% of data breaches reported involves compromised password credentials. Usually this is due to weak passwords that have been hacked or broken into and have been used to gain unauthorized access into systems. So far I've been talking about all the bad news about data breaches and the effect of having poor or weak passwords on the security of data and systems. So let's have a deeper look at the problem, and the problem lies with passwords themselves. So what is a password? A password is a secret word or phrase that must be used to obtain admission or access to a place or thing. In a business, my username and password gives me access to our computer system so that I can do my work. So in a way, that username and password is tied to my identity. And based on that identity that I authenticate, the access is granted based on the access that I need, based on my role in the work that I need to do. So that's great. It's the first level of security. But there's a problem. And in this cartoon, if you have a look at it, that problem's hinted at. So we probably know the story of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. When Alibaba watched the 40 Thieves and listened, he learned that the password was open sesame, and that it opens the door to the cave that contains the treasure. So later on, when the 40 Thieves have left, he uses that same password to open the cave and to steal the treasure. The moral of the story is that when systems are protected with a password alone, such as open sesame, you don't need to be the right person, you just need to be able to know or to steal the password to get access to the treasure. So why are passwords alone not effective? So firstly, the issue that we spoke about with the previous photo, is that passwords don't really do enough to prove your identity. So passwords on their own are a poor means of authentication of authentifying your identity. So if an attacker knows your password, he'll be granted the same access to your data as if he was you. Secondly, static passwords or passwords that don't change can be hacked easily. There's so many different techniques, whether it be brute forcing, cracking, sniffing, snooping, rainbow tables, keyloggers, phishing, or socially engineered. So once that password is compromised, an attacker can gain unfettered access into your network and systems. The third problem is that strong passwords are good, but they're hard to remember. Like as we discovered with our poll this morning, up to 95% of the people on this webinar have forgotten passwords at one time or another. They said that each person has an average 121 passwords to remember. I'm not sure how true that is, but I know I'm coming very close to that. So because passwords are hard to remember, many administrators and staff, they choose passwords that are easy to remember, but are weak and easy to break. So if passwords are hard to remember, there's also a greater likelihood that that password word will be written down somewhere on a sticky yellow note and stuck under the keyboard. Not a good idea. And it's true, I've seen that happen many a time. So some alarming password statistics. As we mentioned earlier, 81% of breaches involve weak and compromised passwords. 70% of employees reuse their passwords for everything. 72% use insecure passwords. Because of these statistics, we can see that passwords alone are not effective. Just a reminder that the average cost of a breach in 2018 is 3.86 million. So worldwide, 3 billion credentials and passwords are stolen every year. So many of those end up for sale or published in the dark web. There's actually a very interesting site. It's called Have I Been Owned? So PWN3D. That means owned in computer speak. So if you go to this website, you're able to put in your email address and see whether or not any of your accounts online that you've used that email address for has been hacked. So once a password is stolen, access is granted to anyone who produces it, and the attacker can gain a foothold into the network. They usually quietly move across the network to deploy malware and escalate their privileges. So when organizations rely on passwords alone to grant authenticated access to their systems, then it's only a matter of time before systems are compromised. I've got a confession to make that in a previous work life, I used to be an IT security auditor for an auditing firm. And every year I would be advocating and telling IT managers for stronger password controls. I would say password length and complexity. Unfortunately, now I know that this can also have a negative effect, because the harder passwords are to crack and the longer they are and the more complex they are, the more impossible it is to remember. Password expiration also causes password fatigue and frustration. And so you might have a seemingly secure password, but whenever you have to change it every 3 months, you just add a different number. So password 1 turns into password 2, etc. So that defeats the purpose. And mandating unique passwords. So it may be that the password is only used once on that particular system, but when passwords are changed, a person can use the same unique password for everything that they use. So if one of the websites that I use my passwords for, if I use the same passwords for everything, was somehow compromised, then all of my different systems would be compromised. All right, So the good news are there are extra techniques and tools that you can use to help solve this problem. So one of them is using password management tools. For example, KeePass, LastPass, or ESET Password Manager. The other solution to this is using, instead of passwords that are hard to remember, you can use a passphrase of something that means something to you that you won't forget anytime soon. So for example, instead of having a one-word long string password, you can use a passphrase like I catch the 707 bus every morning. Now, while these are better solutions than the original traditional approach to passwords, it's still not enough because one, password management tools still rely on a master password, which have the same inherent weaknesses and the same issues as passwords that we've spoken of. And secondly, given enough time, even passphrases themselves, especially with with very powerful computers that are coming on board now, even passphrases themselves are likely to become hacked in the future. So for now, the better solution is to make sure that there are other layers of protection besides password themselves. So if we think about a multiple layered protection, we think about defense in depth. That means controlling what users can access to what they need. It means having anti-malware installed on all endpoints and at all different vectors of attack. So you have an antivirus protecting your emails, you have an antivirus protecting your workstations, an anti-malware as well, protecting your file servers. Additionally, besides being able to prevent malware and viruses, you can also put detection capabilities within your network, for example, using a SIM. But today, our focus is going to be on a way of strengthening authentication or getting into your network using a username and password. And the way we do that is to add an extra layer of protection called multi-factor authentication. What it does is that increases the difficulty of being able to break a password. And how does this work? So multi-factor authentication means three things. Firstly, it's the usual username and password is one-factor authentication. So it relies on knowledge factor, which is something only you know. Admittedly, sometimes passwords are shared, but the way that it works as passwords is something only the person themselves know. Adding two additional factors, such as the possession factor, something only I have, and the inherence factor, something only I am, allows me to add different levels of authentication and makes it harder to prove that I am who I am. Now, today we're focusing on a two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication is the industry standard. That's also because the third factor of authentication, which is the inherence, we also know this as biometrics. So using your fingerprints or using retinal scans or using different things that you are biologically who you say you are. It also adds an additional privacy risk. So if systems are compromised, those things don't change. Those biometric factors, your fingerprints, your retinal scans, those things don't change. So if systems are compromised and your data is compromised, then those could also be used by attackers. So for now, the best way of securing authentication is using these two factors, especially for companies such as non-profits or small to medium organizations. So with two factors, the two factors that are used are something that you know, such as a password, and secondly, something that you have, such as a secure token, a key tag, or even a mobile phone or smartwatch. So earlier on today, when we did the poll, I understand that 90% of people have an account, a web account or an online banking account, which provides them a second factor of authentication. So you send a text message with a code, and that code is used to prove further that you are who you say you are. Now, banks do this because they know that an extra level of security is required besides a PIN number or a password. And so if banks use this to secure our bank accounts and our data, why don't we apply this same situation, this same level of protection to our own networks? So why doesn't everyone use two-factor authentication? And these are the three reasons that we're looking at today. One is that there's a myth that passwords are secure enough, and I hope that what we've spoken about this morning has already debunked that. Second myth is that it's too hard to do. And usually that's from a lack of information, and also just that there are so many other areas to look at in security that this is often one that is ignored. But actually the kind of effect that this has in terms of adding an additional factor and an additional layer to secure your systems, it's actually not too hard at all. And the third is that it's too expensive. And that's not true. So just having a look at the costs of different solutions nowadays, you can be looking at something as little as $30 per user per year. So with two-factor authentication, even if your password is stolen or cracked, unless the attacker also has a second factor, which is ownership of your phone or your secure key tag, then that password, username and password that they have is rendered useless, and they won't be granted access to your account and to your data. So I'd like to talk about ESET Secure Authentication. Now, this is ESET's product, which allows you to have the same kind of protections that the banks have with two-factor authentication. This morning, I was doing a test install of this program, and to tell you the truth, I started the timer and it took less than 7 minutes from go to the end just to install the program onto my server. And to deploy it is also very easy. What you can do is from your secure authentication server is you can send a text message to each user who has a phone or a device to be able to, to have a phone or smartphone device, to be able to install the application so that they can receive the secure code. ESET Secure Authentication protects different logon systems within your environment, whether it's your Windows logon, your access to your Outlook web access, your network VPN. For example, if you're working from home, anything that connects and authenticates through Active Directory, we're able to protect. And also for other systems, such as bespoke or in-house created systems that requires two-factor authentication, we also have an SDK or a software development kit that will allow you to integrate with ESET Secure Authentication. We also use multiple types of delivery options. So you can have a hard token to receive those one-time passwords or codes. You can use a mobile phone app which receives the code, or you're able to do a push authentication. That means you'll receive a message saying you've tried to log into your Windows network and you have the option to approve or to deny access. And the third is being texted a message with a secure code, just as you would with your bank. So these are the different areas that ESET Secure Authentication can protect. I think we mentioned earlier access to your company's VPN if you're working from home, logging in remotely to your computer at work through RDP, securing your Windows network login with your username and password. Then after you type that in, you're asked to supply a one-time password. And then your phone will receive that code, or it will ask you to approve, and you either press approve or put that code into the login. This system also integrates into other web applications like Office 365 and Google Apps. To show how easy it is to install, I've just got a couple of videos that I'd like to show, just to demonstrate what I mean by it's quite easy to install. And here's just some videos that we've got of how that's done.
After viewing this video, you'll be able to install ESET Secure Authentication. Before you start the installation, please refer to the user guide for a list of supported operating systems. Launch the installer package and read and accept the end user license agreement. Now the installer will check all the prerequisites for successful installation. If any prerequisite is missing, it will appear on the screen as failed, and the issue has to be resolved before you can continue. In case the .NET framework is missing, the installer will add this component as part of the installation. From this screen, you'll be able to select the components to install. The installer automatically detects which supported environments are installed and pre-selects them. ESA to work properly, both core components, management tools, and authentication server have to be installed. In case you select a manual component, which is not installed, you'll need to apply the necessary changes before you can proceed. Click the Next button and wait until the installer finishes. Now the installation is complete. That's it. We hope you found this information helpful.
Okay, so that was for an older version, but the install is not very much different from that at all. It's still very quick, still very much the same. The second presentation I'd like to show is one of push authentication, which I mentioned earlier, and here's how that works. So when you're logging onto your Outlook web app, or perhaps to your Windows system, you're able to leverage two-factor authentication, here using a Google smartwatch, to provide the second factor of authentication. And I've just got one more video to show, which serves as a bit of a conclusion and just summarizes what we've talked about so far.
Does your company have sensitive data that your employees need to access remotely? Are you sure it's really secure? Relying only on a traditional password can leave your data exposed because many of us use bad password practices. We have a solution, ESET Secure Authentication. It's safe, cost-effective, and makes it easy and secure to access your data. Our solution adds ultra-secure one-time passwords generated by your mobile phone or token. These avoid the pitfalls of normal passwords. ESET Secure Authentication is easy to set up, deploy, and manage. Thanks to the available API and SDK, it also works with your existing business tools. The beauty of this solution? It requires no investment in extra hardware. Even better, your users don't need to have a data connection to generate one-time passwords. ESET Secure Authentication works with all mobile platforms. Now you've made access to your company data secure. You can focus on your other priorities. Do more with ESET Secure Authentication. Ultra strong, super simple.
So with those demonstrations, I hope that we've shown that putting an extra layer of security for your authentication, for your passwords to secure your network, isn't as hard to do as what it first seems. So this puts an end to the presentation part of this webinar. If you have any further questions, we'll be glad to answer them now.
Great, thanks, Ron. We do have a few questions that have come through. So the first one is, a person in the networking industry that I trusted with Office 365 virus software, it is not required as Office 365 handles it. Separate is firewalls that Windows 10 has and modems has as well, so no other software is required. What are your thoughts on these two comments?
Okay, I do know that we weren't talking about antiviruses alone today. We were talking about securing user credentials. But yes, Office 365 has a different, I suppose, different attack vectors that hackers or malicious actors can attack. And those are really around your passwords, your usernames and passwords. So I think in the risks that we've talked about today, which really is about securing access to your systems, if you use the same username and password for your Office 365 systems as you do, for example, for your Canva attack, when Canva themselves were breached only a few months ago, where user credentials and user data was taken, then those same credentials can be used against your Office 365 environment. So it's not that Office 365 itself is insecure or that it itself doesn't have the required protection for viruses. It's more of a holistic protection around access to your systems. And it doesn't matter if it's more resilient towards viruses. If someone's able to get into the front door of your house, such as in this case with the username and password, then they're still able to compromise and breach your systems. I hope that answered it.
Thanks, Ron. The next one is, why should I use ESET instead of a free program like Windows Defender?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, it's quite a pertinent one at the moment. What we've seen is that Windows Defender in the past hasn't been a very good program for eliminating viruses, the risk of viruses and malware. In effect, even with some of the later tests that they've done, while they have improved their capability of being able to detect malware, and that's really a welcome sign. What we see is that they also have a high level of what we call false positives, which means that with the independent tests that have been done, it's been shown that Microsoft Windows Defender raises a lot of false alarms or false alerts. And the problem with false alarms or false alerts is that the more you get, the more you tend to ignore them, kind of like the boy who cries wolf. So it's a good thing that Microsoft is improving their product. But the way that it works is that because of the testing that's been done, and historically Microsoft focuses on so many different things, many companies would rather entrust their security for fighting, cybercrime to those who actually focus on security. Still looking forward to Microsoft Windows Defender to improve. But at the moment, the independent tests show that there's still a high level of false positives. And because of that, the danger is that when an administrator gets a lot of alerts from Windows Defender, they'll tend to ignore it more.
Thanks, Ron. Next question is, we don't have a server as such. We use a networked NAS for file storage and access. Can we set up two-factor authentication on this?
Okay. If that NAS uses something called Radius for authentication, then most definitely it's something that you'd be able to do. Maybe if it's something that you want to try, if you can contact Connecting Up, they can arrange for a trial and see if it's something that works for your particular system.
Thanks, Ron. Next question is, information online shows that LastPass and KeePass, for example, have been hacked. Are you sure it's a good idea to trust your passwords to companies like this?
Yes. So as I've mentioned in my slide, they're a better alternative to traditional password security, but they aren't perfect. So I know that LastPass, being an online password management tool, it itself has not been hacked, but there are certain attacks and certain phishing attacks that enable attackers to be able to gain your master password. And once they've logged in using your master password, then they have access to all the passwords that you've stored there in your life. So yes, it's on a case-by-case basis, but I myself decide not to use them.
Next question. We already use multi-factor authentication on our website. Are you saying ESET multi-factor could replace the service we are using on our website?
No, that's a good question. Thank you. So if you've already got it in, if you've already got multi-factor authentication for protecting your site, then I think you're ahead of a lot of companies out there, which is a great thing. And it really depends on the fit. So if you're happy with your multi-factor authentication now and it's working perfect for you, then great. But if you're looking for an alternative, yeah, please do contact Tina in Connecting Up, and we can arrange to have a talk with you.
Great. Next question. False alarms. I have personally seen NOD32, Kaspersky, ESET, among others, give false post sites as well. They all have this from time to time. What are your comments on that?
Yeah, I believe it's a common thing that when you use different technologies to try to detect possible malware, false positives will happen, but based on the independent tests run by AV Comparatives, definitely ESET would have one of the lowest false positives. This is, from the latest independent tests that have been run. And I think where ESET may have had, I believe it was either 1 or 0 false positives. In that test, Microsoft had about 33 false positives. So that's the reason why I brought it up.
Thanks, Ron. How can ESET products help prevent phishing scams?
There are different layers of protection that prevent phishing scams with ESET. For one, ESET protects the endpoint, and at the endpoint level, when you receive emails on your email application, those are scanned by ESET. ESET also has email protection at the level of the Exchange server. So as emails come in, emails are scanned, and for possible phishing emails, and those are quarantined and those are alerted. The other thing is that if phishing emails do go through and you click on a link that is a unknown phishing site, those are blocked, so you're not able to enter those websites. So those are just 3 examples of how how phishing is stopped through ESET software.
Thanks, Ron. Next question is, do you know how Avast business software results were for false positives?
Let me have a quick look. I may have it on me, but maybe if I can answer that question in a moment, because I do have some data of those recent tests. It's just that I don't have it right in front of me at the moment.
No, that's fine. I can share David's information with you, Ron, and we can take that conversation
okay.
offline and share those stats. So next question is...
I can answer that quickly now.
Okay,
so in the last test, Avast had 7 false positives that affected a very low number of users, and 1 false positive that affected several hundreds of users. To compare, ESET had 2 very low, 2 false positives that affected a few fewer than 100 users. So yeah, compared to 8 versus 2. Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Next question is, what steps do ESET recommend we take if we have been compromised or hacked?
Okay. So that's a very serious situation. The first thing that you would want to do is you would want to contain the breach. So that means your network administrators would make sure that any endpoints that have been compromised are contained or disconnected from the network. Secondly, immediately running an antivirus program or anti-malware, such as ESET, on all of the computers in your network. Now, with ESET, as soon as a virus or malware is detected, you can actually set a policy that triggers this scan automatically. Secondly, I think that get immediate support. There are organizations that provide IT security assistance and focus on that are able to help you to contain the threat and to prevent to take steps to prevent further damage. Because of the Breach Notification Act that came out last year, one of the steps that need to be done is to inform the customers. So there should be a proper plan created on how to not just contain the breach, but also send a communication to the customers and to notify the regulatory agencies, the Privacy Commissioner, and the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner that I spoke of earlier. And then I think one of the other steps as well is to secure your backups, to make sure that your backups are ready to be restored and that you're able to get access back to that critical data in case if it's lost. In the case of some of the hospitals that were affected by the ransomware in Victoria, some of the hospitals that fared the best are those that had a disaster recovery plan that allowed them to restore their data and get it back up running again. And so those are the first few steps of, I suppose, containing the breach and to start recovering your data. And then you need to do more testing to ensure that your network is secure and to launch further investigation as to how you were breached in the first place, and to improve security around those areas.
Great, thank you, Ron. That's all for questions today. Was there anything you wanted to add before we wrap up this session?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for taking the time out to listen this morning. I hope it's been informational for you. And if you have any further questions regarding our product or the presentation that we had today, or if you would like to arrange for a trial, I know that they have it available with the Connecting Up discount system. So please feel free to contact Tina and Connecting Up. But thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to be with you and to speak through this today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ron, for presenting today, and thank you everyone for joining us for the first session. As always, if you have any questions that come to your mind later on or any feedback, please send that through to events@connectingup.org and we will answer those questions offline. Don't forget the recording will be available on our website tomorrow and a link will be sent to you. I'll also include the details of the ESET products available through our discounts program and who you can contact to organise for a trial if you wanted. You will be able to join the next session 5 minutes before the start time, so please note that you do need to use the same link to join all the sessions. Again, thank you for being with us. If we don't see you in any of the other sessions today, enjoy the rest of your day. Otherwise, we'll see you all online again soon. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.